Never go to the farm, Linda. Promise me. Those words, spoken with uncharacteristic intensity, were among the few demands my husband Michael ever made during our 25 years of marriage. I had always respected his wishes, even when curiosity gnawed at me during those rare moments when he'd mentioned his Canadian childhood on a property he'd left behind. But now, Michael was gone, taken by a heart attack that no one, not even me, had seen coming. After 25 years of marriage, I had become a widow at 53, with a bitter daughter and a hollow space in my chest where certainty used to live. Mrs. Henderson, the voice of Michael's attorney, Mr. Carter, pulled me from my thoughts. We sat in his wood-paneled office 10 days after the funeral, the finality of death reduced to paperwork and signatures. There's one more item. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. He slid a small box across his desk. Inside lay an antique brass key attached to a maple leaf keychain and a sealed envelope with my name written in Michael's precise handwriting. "What is this?" I asked, turning the heavy key in my palm. "Your husband purchased a property in Saskatchewan, Canada 4 years ago. According to his instructions, you are only to be informed of its existence after his passing." Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses. "The deed has been transferred to your name. All taxes are paid for the next 6 years. A property in Canada, I struggled to process this information. Michael didn't own any property outside of our home. It's called Willow Ridge Ranch. Apparently, it was his childhood home, though the deed shows it changed hands several times before he repurchased it. The farm, the place he'd forbidden me to visit, the place that had caused his gentle face to harden whenever it was mentioned. Mrs. Henderson, there's something else you should know." Mr. Carter lowered his voice. "The property has become quite valuable recently. There have already been inquiries about its availability." "Valuable. It's a farm." "Yes, but according to my information, significant oil deposits were discovered in the region about 20 months ago. Your husband declined multiple offers from energy companies." My head spun with questions. Michael had never mentioned oil money or any property purchase. We'd lived comfortably on his engineering salary and my income as a high school English teacher, but we were hardly wealthy. How had he afforded to buy a farm, and why keep it secret from me? I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dearest Linda, if you're reading this, then I've left you too soon. I'm sorry. There's so much I should have told you, but couldn't bring myself to face. The farm is yours now. I've spent the last 4 years transforming it from the broken place of my childhood into something beautiful, something worthy of you. I know I made you promise never to go there. I'm releasing you from that promise. In fact, I'm asking you to go just once before you decide what to do with it." On the main house's desk is a laptop. The password is the date we met, followed by your maiden name. "I love you, Lynn, more than you'll ever know. Michael." I clutched the letter to my chest, tears blurring my vision. Even from beyond the grave, Michael was full of surprises. "I need to see this place," I said finally. "Of course," Mr. Carter nodded. "But I should warn you, Michael's family in Canada has contested the will. His brothers claim he was not mentally competent when he repurchased the family property. That's ridiculous. Michael was the most rational person I've ever known. Nevertheless, they filed legal objections. Given the property's newfound value, it might get complicated." I tucked the key into my pocket, a strange determination settling over me. "I'm going to Canada, Mr. Carter, today." 72 hours later, after hastily booked flights and a long drive through the Saskatchewan countryside, I found myself standing before imposing wooden gates marked Willow Ridge Ranch in wrought iron. Beyond stretched a property far larger and more impressive than I had imagined, rolling hills, stands of maple trees turning gold with autumn, and in the distance, a large farmhouse, and several outbuildings, all freshly painted. This was no broken-down family farm. This was an estate. The key turned smoothly in the gate's lock. As I drove up the winding gravel driveway, my heart pounded with anticipation and apprehension. What secrets had Michael kept here? What part of himself had he hidden from me for all these years? The farmhouse was a stunning 2-story structure with a wide porch and large windows. Nothing about it suggested the pain Michael had always associated with his childhood home. This place had been loved, restored, reimagined. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the front door. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and I stepped across the threshold into my husband's secret world. What I saw inside made me gasp, my knees weakening as I gripped the doorframe for support. The entryway opened into a soaring great room with exposed beams and a stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath. It was the horses, not real ones, but everywhere I looked, exquisite paintings of horses in full gallop across endless fields, detailed sculptures capturing their power and grace, photographs of magnificent breeds framed in simple black frames. My lifelong passion, the one indulgence Michael had always supported but never quite understood, surrounded me in a gallery dedicated to my greatest love. And there on a desk by the window overlooking endless pastures sat a silver laptop with a single red rose laid across its closed lid. Before I could take another step, the crunch of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Through the front window, I watched a black SUV pull up behind my rental car. 3 men emerged, all bearing the unmistakable Henderson features that Michael had carried. Tall frames, dark hair, strong jawlines. The Henderson brothers had arrived, and from their grim expressions, they hadn't come to welcome the widow to Canada. The men approached the house with the confident stride of people who believed they belonged there. I quickly closed and locked the front door, my heart racing. Through the side window, I watched them pause on the porch, conferring among themselves before the oldest, a silver-haired version of Michael with harder eyes rapped sharply on the door. "Mrs. Henderson, we know you're in there. We should talk." His voice carried the same Canadian accent that had softened Michael's speech when he was tired or upset. I remained silent, backing away from the door. Michael's warning about his family had always been vague but emphatic. Now faced with their unexpected arrival, instinct told me to be cautious. The knocking came again, more insistent. "Linda, M. Richard, Henderson, Michael's older brother. These are our brothers, Stephen and Mark. We're here about the farm." Of course they were. They weren't here about Michael or to meet the wife their brother had loved for 25 years. They were here about the suddenly valuable property. I glanced at the laptop on the desk. Whatever answers I needed might be there, not with the strangers on the porch. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive knocking, I moved to the desk, opened the computer, and entered the password 06121997 Baker. The screen came to life, immediately opening to a folder labeled for Linda. Inside were hundreds of video files, each named with a date starting from 10 days ago, the day after his funeral, and extending a full year into the future. With trembling fingers, I clicked the first one. Michael's face filled the screen. Not the thin, pale version from his final months, but healthy, vibrant, clearly recorded some time ago. He smiled directly into the camera, that crooked grin that had always made my heart skip. "Hello, Lynn. If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you've come to the farm, despite my years of making you promise not to." He chuckled softly. "I should have known you wouldn't be able to resist, especially after Mr. Carter told you about it. A lump formed in my throat. Even now, he knew me so well. I've made a video for every day of your first year without me. 1 year of me keeping you company while you grieve. 1 year of explaining everything I should have told you while I was alive. He looked down briefly, then back at the camera with determination. Starting with why I bought back the farm, I swore I'd never set foot on again. The knocking outside had stopped. Through the window, I could see the men returning to their vehicle, retrieving documents, conferring with stern expressions, Michael continued. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 3 to 6 years. I chose not to tell you or Emily. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want our final years overshadowed by death. His eyes softened. I wanted to live fully with you until the end, not slowly die in front of you. Shock and anger surged through me. He'd hidden his diagnosis, made medical decisions without me, denied me the chance to prepare to cherish our final moments knowingly. I know you're angry right now, he said as if reading my thoughts. You have every right to be, but I hope you'll understand that I made this choice out of love, not deception. The men outside were making phone calls now, pacing the gravel drive with the frustrated energy of thwarted entitlement. When I got my diagnosis, I decided to use whatever time I had left to create something meaningful for you. You always loved horses, always talked about having land someday where you could raise them. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the farm. I'd fled at 18, vowing never to return. He leaned closer to the camera. What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought the farm from our father before he died. The old man was broke after years of failed schemes, drinking away the family money. He sold it to me for a fraction of its worth, desperate for cash, swearing me to secrecy from my brothers, who still thought they would inherit it someday. This explained the legal challenge. They believed they had rights to property that Michael had legitimately purchased. The farm was in ruins when I bought it, Lynn, just like when I was a kid. But this time, I had the resources to transform it. Every business trip in the last 4 years, I was here overseeing renovations, building something for you. Outside, the brothers had approached the door again. This time, the oldest Richard held a document against the window for me to see, a court order of some kind. My brothers will come for it, Michael continued in the video, his expression hardening. They never wanted the farm until last year, when oil was discovered in the region. Suddenly, the worthless property they'd mocked me for buying was valuable. They'll try everything to take it from you. One of the brothers was on the phone again, his expression triumphant as he ended the call. In the bottom drawer of this desk is a blue folder with every legal document you need. The farm is unquestionably yours. I made sure of it. Michael's face softened again. But Lynn, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you, filled it with beauty for you, but I don't want it to become a burden. A vehicle was coming up the driveway, a police cruiser with Royal Canadian Mounted Police markings. The brothers watched its approach with satisfied expressions. One last thing, Michael said. In the stables, you'll find 7 horses, all breeds you've admired over the years. The staff I've hired will continue caring for them whether you're here or not. They're my last gift to you, along with the means to enjoy them. The video ended, freezing on Michael's smiling face as knocking resumed at the door, more authoritative this time. Mrs. Henderson, RCMP, we need you to open the door, please. With a deep breath, I closed the laptop, retrieved the blue folder from the drawer, and went to face whatever came next. As I reached for the door handle, my phone rang. Emily, our daughter, calling from home. I hesitated, then answered. Emily, now's not a good time. Mom! Her voice was tight with anger. Why didn't you tell me about Dad's farm or the oil? His brothers just called me offering a fair settlement if I helped them contest the will. What the hell is going on? So they'd reached out to my daughter already. The realization ignited something protective and fierce within me. They weren't just coming after me. They were trying to manipulate my grieving daughter. I'll explain everything later, I promised, watching the police officer exchange words with the brothers. But Emily, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. These men are not our friends. Mom, if there's money involved? This isn't about money, I interrupted, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. This is about what your father wanted. Please trust me on this. After a moment of silence, she sighed. Fine, but call me back as soon as you can. I hung up and opened the door to face a young Royal Canadian mounted police officer, flanked by 3 Henderson men, whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. Mrs. Henderson, I'm Officer Miller. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing estate dispute. I smiled calmly, channeling the strength Michael had always admired in me. Of course, officer, but first, I think you should see these. I held out the blue folder containing Michael's documentation. My husband anticipated this exact situation. The oldest brother, Richard, stepped forward with a dismissive wave. Family property disputes are complicated, officer. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused. Actually, I interrupted. I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widow standing on property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late husband's DNA. I turned to the officer. And I'd appreciate if you'd review these documents before allowing anyone onto my property. The officer took the folder, his expression neutral as he began examining the contents. The Henderson brothers exchanged glances, their confidence visibly wavering for the first time. I thought of Michael's video of the secret he'd kept to spare me and Emily unnecessary pain, of the magnificent gift he'd created in his final years. Whatever game his brothers were playing, I was determined not to lose the last tangible expression of my husband's love without a fight. The officer looked up from the documents. His expression changed. These appear to be in order, Mrs. Henderson. A clear deed transfer, properly notarized statements, even certified bank records of the original purchase. He turned to the brothers. Gentlemen, I don't see grounds for forcing an inspection today. This appears to be a matter for the civil courts. Richard's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. That woman has no right. That woman, I interjected calmly, is Michael Henderson's wife, and I have every right to be here. As the brothers reluctantly retreated to their vehicle, followed by the apologetic officer, I felt a strange sense of both loss and discovery. The husband I thought I knew completely had kept secrets, some painful, others breathtakingly beautiful. Now I faced a choice. Retreat to the safety of my familiar life, or step fully into this unexpected legacy and the battle that came with it. I closed the door, walked back to the desk, and opened the laptop again. Tomorrow's video awaited, and with it, more pieces of the man I had loved and was only now beginning to fully understand. Outside, the Henderson brothers might have lost this skirmish, but their expressions as they drove away made one thing abundantly clear. The war for Willow Ridge Ranch had only just begun. I spent that night in Michael's Noir farmhouse, surrounded by the evidence of his secret labor of love. Sleep eluded me, my mind churning with revelations. Michael's hidden illness, the transformed farm, his brother's determination to claim it, and the hundreds of video messages awaiting me on the laptop. At dawn, I explored the property properly for the first time. The main house was a masterpiece of restoration, blending original farmhouse elements with modern comforts. Every room reflected thoughtful consideration of my tastes, from the library filled with first editions of my favorite novels, to the sunroom overlooking the eastern pastures, perfect for morning coffee. But it was the stables that truly took my breath away. As promised in Michael's video, 7 magnificent horses occupied the spotless stalls. An Andalusian, a Frisian, 2 quarter horses, a thoroughbred, and a gentle Appaloosa that nickered softly when I approached. Good morning, ma'am. The voice startled me. A man in his early 60s emerged from the tack room, wiping his hands on a cloth. I am Frank. Your husband hired me to manage the stables. Linda Henderson, I replied, extending my hand, though I suspect you already knew that. He nodded a gentle smile, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Mr. Henderson spoke of you often during his visits, said you had a natural way with horses that he never managed to acquire. You knew my husband well. Frank hesitated. As well as he allowed anyone to know him. I suppose he was here every month for the past 4 years overseeing everything personally. Never delegated a decision if he could make it himself. That sounded like Mickle methodical, hands-on, attentive to detail. The black Frisian there. Frank continued nodding toward a magnificent stallion watching us with intelligent eyes. That's Shadow. Your husband spent months tracking him down specifically. Said he reminded him of a horse in a painting you loved. My heart clenched. The Stubbs painting of a black horse against a stormy sky. It admired it at a museum 20 years ago, and Michael had remembered. Did he? I hesitated, unsure how to frame the question. Did my husband ever mention his health to you? A shadow crossed Frank's weathered face. Not directly, but these last 6 months he pushed harder, worked longer hours, added more features to the property, like a man racing against a clock only he could see. The confirmation stung, but also explained the driven quality I'd sensed in Michael during his final months. I'd attributed it to work stress, never imagining he was creating all this while knowing his time was limited. His brothers were here yesterday, I said, watching Frank's reaction carefully. His expression hardened. They've been circling since the oil was discovered on neighboring properties, suddenly very interested in the family farm they hadn't visited in decades. What can you tell me about them? Frank secured a stall door before answering. Richards, the oldest, runs some investment firm in Vancouver, always acted like he was doing Michael a favor by acknowledging him. Stevens, the middle one lawyer, slick talker, and Marks, the youngest, followed Richard into finance, always in his shadow. And their relationship with Michael strained doesn't begin to cover it. From what I gathered, they tormented him as a child city boys who visited the farm reluctantly looking down on him for staying to help your father-in-law run the place. Frank shook his head. When Michael returned to buy the property, they mocked him for wasting money on worthless land right up until the Petersons struck oil 2 properties over. This aligned with the fragments Michael had shared over the years, his difficult childhood, his escape to the United States for college, his reluctance to discuss his Canadian family. They'll be back, I said more to myself than to Frank. Count on it. He nodded grimly. But Mr. Henderson prepared for that. He was always 3 steps ahead. Back at the house, I forced myself to eat breakfast before opening the laptop for today's video. Michael appeared on screen, seated in what I now recognized as the farm's library. Good morning, Lynn. I hope you slept well in our new home. He smiled that crooked smile I missed with physical intensity. Today I want to show you something special. The camera moved as he carried it through the house down a hallway I hadn't explored, stopping at a locked door. This room is for you alone. The key is in the top drawer of the bedside table, the antique silver one with the horse engraving. I paused, the video went to the master bedroom, and found the key exactly where he described. Retracing Michael's path from the video, I located the door, unassuming, situated at the end of the east wing. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I pushed the door open and gasped. A fully equipped art studio filled the large corner room, bathed in perfect northern light from floor to ceiling windows. Easels, canvases, paints, brushes, everything a painter could desire, arranged with loving precision. I hadn't painted in 20 years. After college, I'd set aside my artistic aspirations to teach to help support us, while Michael built his engineering career to raise Emily. Over the years, someday had become a distant dream, then eventually, a bittersweet memory of a path not taken. The video continued, Michael's voice pulling me back to the laptop Ed carried with me. You gave up so much for us, Lynn. Your painting was the first sacrifice. Though you never complained, I always promised myself I'd give it back to you someday. Tears blurred my vision as I surveyed the studio. The professional-grade supplies, the inspiration books stacked neatly on shelves, the north-facing windows that would provide perfect, consistent light. "There's one more thing," Michael continued. "Check the cabinet below the window seat." I crossed to the cushioned window seat that overlooked the eastern pasture, now golden in the morning light. Below it, built into the wall, was a cabinet I might have missed if not directed to it. Inside lay a flat archival box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid, then sank to my knees in shock. My paintings, dozens of them, all the work I'd created in college, the pieces I thought had been lost in our moves over the years. Michael had preserved them, protected them, kept them safe for 2 decades, until he could return them to me in this perfect space. On top lay a small canvas I recognized immediately. My final project before graduation. A self-portrait of a young woman looking forward. Eyes alight with possibilities. Michael had asked to keep it the day I completed it. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note in his precise script. "She's still in there, Lynn. The woman who painted with such passion and vision. I've given you the space. The rest is up to you." I clutched the note to my chest, overwhelmed by love and loss in equal measure. Michael had seen me, truly seen me in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. The sound of vehicles on the gravel driveway pulled me from this emotional moment. Moving to the studio window, I watched 2 cars approach the now familiar black SUV of the Henderson brothers, and behind it, a sleek silver Mercedes I recognized instantly. Emily had arrived, and from the way she emerged from her car and strode confidently toward the brothers, it appeared they had already begun working on her. My daughter, Michael's daughter with her father's dark hair and my stubborn chin, was smiling and shaking hands with the uncles she'd never met. Whatever fragile peace I'd found in Michael's posthumous gifts evaporated in the face of this new complication. The battle for Willow Ridge Ranch had just become significantly more personal. I watched from the window as Emily exchanged friendly greetings with her uncles, her body language open and receptive. At 27, our daughter had her father's analytical mind and my determination, but lacked Michael's patience and my caution. She had always been quick to form opinions, slow to revise them. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Arrived with Uncle Richard and the others. "Coming in now. We need to talk, Uncle Richard." They'd known each other less than a day, and already she was claiming family connection. I tucked Michael's note into my pocket, locked the studio behind me, and went to face this new alliance. Emily, using the familiarity of daughter's privilege, entered without knocking, the brothers following in her wake like wolves behind an unwitting guide. "Mom." Emily embraced me briefly, then stepped back, her eyes darting around the impressive entryway. "This place is unbelievable. Why didn't Dad ever tell us about it?" Before I could answer, Richard stepped forward, his resemblance to Michael painfully sharp in the morning light. "Linda, I believe we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. We were surprised by your sudden appearance, just as you were surprised by ours." His conciliatory tone didn't match the calculating look in his eyes. Beside him, Stephen and Mark maintained carefully neutral expressions, though I noticed Stephen clutching a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained legal documents. "Emily," I said, ignoring Richard completely. "I thought we agreed you wouldn't engage with your father's brothers until we'd had a chance to talk." She flushed slightly. "They called again this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should at least hear them out in person." Her chin lifted defiantly, the same expression she'd worn as a teenager challenging curfew. "Besides, they're my family too." "Family you didn't know existed until yesterday," I reminded her gently. "Only because Dad kept them from us," she countered, "just like he kept this whole place secret." "Don't you think that's strange? What else was he hiding?" The question hit uncomfortably close to the revelations in Michael's videos. He had hidden his illness, his property purchase, his reclamation of his artistic dreams for me, but his reasons had been born of love, not deception. Your father had complicated relationships with his brothers, I said carefully. He had reasons for the distance he maintained. Richard gave a dismissive wave. Ancient history siblings clash especially in difficult families like ours. What matters now is moving forward together. Exactly, Emily agreed with the earnestness of someone who believed they were being perfectly reasonable. Uncle Richard has explained everything. This farm has been in the Henderson family for generations. Dad bought it from Grandpa Henderson, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers eventually. I suppressed a sigh. They'd been working on her for less than a day, and already she was parroting their version of events. And the sudden interest in the property wouldn't have anything to do with the oil discovery, I asked mildly. Stephen stepped forward, opening his portfolio. The mineral rights situation is just one aspect of the complex legal picture. We've prepared a fair settlement offer that honors Michael's wishes while acknowledging the Henderson family's historic claim to the property. We're prepared to be very generous, Richard added, placing a grandfatherly hand on Emily's shoulder. A 1/3 share to you, Linda, 1/3 to Emily, and 1/3 split among us brothers. Everyone wins. Emily looked at me expectantly, clearly already sold on the proposal. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell it all, walk away with millions, and Dad's family stays intact. Your father specifically left this property to me, I said, meeting Richard's gaze steadily. Not to you, not to his brothers. Out of confusion and misplaced sentiment, Richard countered smoothly. Michael wasn't thinking clearly in his final years. A flash of anger burned through me. My husband was perfectly sound of mind until the day he died. Then why all the secrecy? Mark spoke for the first time, his voice softer than his brother's, but no less pointed. Why hide the property purchase from his wife and daughter? Why the elaborate arrangements with the lawyer? These aren't the actions of a man thinking rationally. I thought of the videos, the renovated farm, the art studio. Each element meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing about it suggested confusion or impaired judgment. Mom Emily said, her voice gentler now. I know this is hard. Dad left both of us, and now we're discovering all these secrets. But this proposal makes financial sense. We'd both be set for life. The door opened behind them, and Frank appeared, his weathered face concerned. Everything all right, Mrs. Henderson. I saw the vehicles arrive. The brothers turned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Richard's eyes narrowed. This is a family matter. Frank is my employee, I said firmly. He's welcome in my home. Actually, Stephen interjected, his employment status is among the disputed assets pending resolution of our legal claim. Frank stood his ground. Mr. Henderson hired me personally, made me promise to look after the place and Mrs. Henderson if anything happened to him. Well, be reviewing all staff appointments, Richard said dismissively. I'd heard enough. I think it's time for you to leave, all of you. I looked pointedly at the brothers, then softened my gaze when it reached Emily. Except you, of course. You're always welcome to stay. You're not even considering their offer? Emily asked, incredulous. I'll review any written proposal with my own attorney, I replied. But I won't be pressured in my own home. Richard's mask of conciliation slipped, revealing the hard businessman beneath. This property is worth tens of millions with the oil rights. We can do this amicably, or we can make things very difficult. Is that a threat? I asked with more calmness than I felt. A reality check, he corrected. You're a school teacher from Wisconsin, facing a legal battle against opponents with significantly more resources. Michael may have meant well, but he placed you in an untenable position. I thought of the blue folder with its meticulous documentation, the videos showing Michael's clear-headed planning, the transformed property that represented his final act of love. I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing, I said quietly. Now please leave. Emily, you're welcome to stay for lunch if you'd like. She looked torn, glancing between me and her newly discovered uncles. I think I'll go with them for now. We have more to discuss. She kissed my cheek quickly. Think about the offer, Mom. Please. I watched them leave, a hollow feeling expanding in my chest. In just 24 hours, my daughter had been pulled into the orbit of men Michael had spent his life avoiding. Whatever they were telling her was working. I could see it in her receptive posture, her quick adoption of their perspective. Frank waited until their vehicles had disappeared down the driveway before speaking. Mrs. Henderson, there's something you should know. Something your husband asked me not to mention unless absolutely necessary. I turned to him, mentally exhausted, but forcing myself to focus. What is it? It's about the true extent of the property and what's really hidden here. He gestured toward the stables. We should walk. Some things shouldn't be discussed indoors, where walls might have ears. As I followed him across the yard, the morning sun illuminated the beautiful farm my husband had created in secret. Whatever revelation awaited me, I was certain of one thing. Michael had anticipated this battle. Perhaps even Emily's vulnerability to his brother's manipulation. The question was whether he had prepared me enough to win a fight I never knew was coming. Frank led me past the main stables toward a weathered barn I hadn't explored yet. Unlike the pristine, renovated structures on the rest of the property, this building retained its original rustic character, deliberately unimproved to appear unimportant. Your husband was a careful man, Frank said, producing an old iron key. After his brother's first visit last year, he became even more cautious. They visited before Michael never mentioned that. Frank nodded grimly. Showed up unannounced once they caught wind of the oil discovery on neighboring properties. Your husband was here supervising construction of the art studio. They didn't recognize him at first. He'd grown a beard during his treatment. The casual mention of Michael's treatment sent a fresh wave of pain through me. While I'd been obliviously teaching high school literature in Wisconsin, my husband had been here sick, creating this sanctuary while fending off his predatory brothers. What happened? He observed them from a distance, then left without revealing himself. That night, he made changes to the property plans. Frank unlocked the barn door. Starting with this, the door swung open to reveal an ordinary-look barn interior, hay bales, old farm equipment, dust motes dancing in beams of sunlight filtering through gaps in the walls. Frank moved confidently to the back corner, shifting several bales to expose a trap door set into the dirt floor. Your husband installed this entrance last winter. The workers thought they were building a root cellar. He pulled the heavy door upward, revealing a sturdy wooden staircase descending into darkness. After you, Mrs. Henderson. Curiosity overcoming apprehension, I followed Frank down the stairs. At the bottom, he flipped a switch, and lights flickered on, revealing a concrete tunnel stretching forward into the earth. What is this place? Your husband called it insurance. I call it genius. Frank gestured for me to follow as he walked the tunnel. The Henderson brothers think they know the full extent of the property and its value. They don't. The tunnel extended perhaps 50 yards before opening into a large concrete room filled with filing cabinets, a desk with computer equipment, and walls covered with maps and documents. Welcome to Michael's war room, Frank said, a hint of pride in his voice. Everything he collected about his brothers, their business dealings, and the true value of Willow Ridge Ranch. I moved to the nearest wall where a detailed survey map was pinned, showing not just the farm, but surrounding properties for miles. Red markings indicated oil deposit locations, with handwritten notes about depth quality and extraction challenges. I don't understand, I said, turning to Frank. Michael knew about the oil? Not at first. He bought this place to renovate for you, pure and simple. But about 20 months ago, when Peterson's land showed oil, he hired geologists to survey Willow Ridge Ranch secretly. Frank pointed to the map. They found something unexpected. The largest deposit isn't under the eastern section where everyone's drilling. It's here, under the western acres that look worthless. I studied the map more carefully, noting the concentration of red markings on the rugged, apparently unusable portion of the property that stretched into the foothills, land Richard hadn't even mentioned in his proposed division. The oil company's surveys missed it because the formation is unusual, deeper, and shaped differently than they expected. Frank continued, "Your husband verified it with 3 independent experts swearing them to secrecy, so the property is even more valuable than his brothers realize exponentially. But that's not all." Frank moved to a filing cabinet withdrawing a thick folder. Michael documented decades of questionable business practices by all 3 brothers. Tax evasion, insider trading, misappropriation of client funds, enough evidence to ruin them professionally if it ever came to light. I leafed through the meticulous documentation, recognizing Michael's thorough approach to problem solving. Email printouts, financial records, sworn statements from former employees. He had built an airtight case against his brothers. Why would he collect all this protection? Frank sat at the desk, gesturing for me to take the other chair. He knew they'd come after the farm once he was gone. He wanted you to have leverage. I thought of Richard's smug confidence, Stephen's legal maneuvering, their quick work turning Emily against me. He anticipated everything. Not everything, Frank said quietly. He didn't expect them to get to your daughter so quickly. The reminder of Emily's betrayal stung. They're manipulating her with half-truths and promises of wealth and playing on her grief, Frank added. She lost her father. Suddenly, they're offering a connection to him through shared blood and history. Powerful draw for a young woman mourning her dad. He was right. Emily had always been Daddy's girl, sharing Michael's analytical mind and love of puzzles. His death had left her adrift, vulnerable to anyone offering connection to him. What do I do now? I asked, half to myself. That depends on what you want, Frank replied. You could sell everything, property, oil rights, the whole package, and walk away wealthy, but perhaps forever estranged from your daughter. You could fight the brothers legally using this leverage, which might win the battle but worsen family wounds. Or what you could do, what your husband always did. Think 3 steps ahead and find the path no one expects. I considered this as I continued examining the war room. On the desk sat a framed photograph I'd never seen before. Michael as a teenager, standing proudly beside a magnificent chestnut horse, his face alight with an innocent joy I'd rarely glimpsed in the man I married. That's Comet, Frank said, noticing my focus on the photo. Your husband's horse when he was a boy. Only bright spot in his childhood here from what he told me. His brothers sold the animal when Michael was away at school just to hurt him. Apparently, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Michael's support of my love for horses despite having no personal interest in them. The 7 magnificent animals in the stable weren't just a gift. They were his reclamation of something precious his brothers had stolen from him. I picked up the photograph, a plan beginning to form in my mind. Frank, does the laptop with Michael's videos work down here? He nodded. There's a secure Wi-Fi network throughout the property. Your husband made sure of it. Good. I need to watch the next few videos ahead of schedule. Then I need you to arrange a meeting for me. With whom? First my daughter alone away from her uncles, then my attorney, and finally... I glanced at the wall of evidence Michael had compiled against his brothers. I think I'd like to speak with those oil company representatives who've been making offers on the property. Frank smiled for the first time since Wed entered the hidden bunker. You're planning something your husband would approve of? I'm planning something worthy of the man who loved me enough to create all this. I corrected a new determination, steadying my voice. And I'm going to need your help. Whatever you need, Frank promised. Your husband saved my life once years ago, gave me this job when no one else would take a chance on an ex-con trying to rebuild his life. I owe him everything, and by extension, I owe you. This was yet another side of Michael I hadn't known. His quiet generosity extending beyond our immediate family, changing lives. I'd never even heard about. As we left the bunker, carefully concealing the entrance again, I felt a strange sense of connection to my late husband. Not the grief that had dominated the past weeks, but a partnership that somehow continued beyond death. He had left me not just a property and material security, but tools and knowledge to forge my own path forward. The Henderson brothers believed they were facing a naive widow out of her depth. They had no idea what was coming. Over the next 72 hours, I barely slept, fueled instead by determination and the growing clarity of my plan. I watched a week's worth of Michael's videos in a single night, each one revealing more of his strategy and the depth of his foresight. "They'll try to divide and conquer," he warned in one recording, as if speaking directly to my current situation. "Richard will be the friendly face, Stephen, the legal threat, Mark, the silent observer, and they'll target Emily. She's their easiest path to destabilizing your position." In another video, he walked through the western section of the property, the supposedly worthless acres his brothers had deliberately excluded from their proposal. "This land looks like nothing, Lynn. Scrubby hills, rocky terrain, difficult access. That's why it's perfect. No one looks closely at what appears valueless." Armed with Michael's insights and my own growing understanding of what I faced, I arranged to meet Emily at a small cafe in the nearest town, 20 miles from the farm, neutral territory, away from both the Henderson brothers' influence and the emotional pull of Michael's carefully crafted sanctuary. She arrived 15 minutes late, defensive posture already in place before she even sat down. "I can't stay long. Uncle Richard is taking me to meet the family attorney this afternoon." "Uncle Richard?" I repeated mildly. "You've become quite close in 4 days." She flushed. "They've been nothing but kind and welcoming, which is more than I can say for you. You're treating them like enemies instead of Dad's family." I sipped my coffee, choosing my next words carefully. "Do you remember that art history course you took sophomore year? The professor who talked about perspective, how where you stand completely changes what you see. What does that have to do with anything? You've only heard their perspective on this situation. I'm asking you to consider there might be another view. Your father's. Dad's dead," she said bluntly, pain flashing across her features. "And he obviously didn't trust either of us enough to tell us about this place while he was alive." I reached into my bag and withdrew a tablet. Actually, he left something for both of us. "What is that?" "Your father made videos, Emily, hundreds of them, messages to guide me, us after he was gone." I turned the tablet to face her, queuing up the specific video Michael had labeled for Emily when she needs it. Her face paled. "He made videos. He knew he was dying," I said softly, finally sharing the truth. "He was diagnosed 4 years ago with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. He chose not to tell us. Wanted to spare us watching him decline." "That's impossible." He would have told me, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Watch the video, Emily. Hear it from him." With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Michael's face appeared, healthy, vibrant, his eyes crinkling with the smile that was so uniquely his. "Hello, my brilliant girl. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry about all the secrets I kept." He chuckled softly. "You never did like being kept in the dark about anything, even as a toddler." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as her father continued. "I should have told you I was sick. Should have given you time to prepare to ask all those questions you're so good at asking. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years together to be normal, not overshadowed by my diagnosis. I hope someday you'll forgive me for that choice." Michael shifted, leaning closer to the camera. "But there's something else you need to know. Something about my brothers that I've never shared with you." Our arrangement wasn't some petty family squabble. Emily, they embezzled my portion of our father's estate when I was 19. Used my name on fraudulent documents while I was away at college. When I discovered it and threatened to expose them, they threatened to implicate me as a willing participant. I left Canada, changed my name slightly from Jonathan to Michael, and started over in Wisconsin. Met your mother, built a life, raised you. It was more than enough. But my brothers never changed. Whatever they're telling you now, remember this. They've wanted control of the family property for decades, not out of sentiment, but pure greed. And they'll use anyone, including my daughter, to get it. The video ended, freezing on Michael's concerned face. Emily sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. He was protecting us, she whispered finally. All this time for more than just his illness, I confirmed gently. Your uncles aren't the family connection they're pretending to be. They're opportunists who see you as their easiest path to what they want. She wiped her tears, anger replacing grief in her expression. They've been lying to me, haven't they? About everything. Not everything. The farm is worth millions. That part is true. But they haven't told you about the western section they conveniently excluded from their proposal, or the true extent of the oil deposits there. Understanding dawned in her eyes. They're trying to cheat us. Us, I repeated, hope flickering. Does that mean you're back on my side? Mom, I never left your side. She looked down, ashamed. I wanted to feel connected to Dad through his family. They had stories about him as a kid. Photos I'd never seen. I understand, I assured her, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Grief makes us vulnerable in ways we can't anticipate. But now we need to be smarter than they are. Together. Emily straightened her expression, shifting from devastation to determination, so like her father that my heart ached. What's the plan? I smiled, feeling the first real sense of confidence since this ordeal began. First, we're meeting my attorney this evening. Not the family attorney your uncles want to use, but someone recommended by Michael's lawyer in Wisconsin. Then tomorrow, we have an appointment with Frontier Ridge Energy, the oil company. Why? Because knowledge is leverage. And right now, we know something your uncles don't. Exactly where the oil is and how much there really is. I showed her the geological surveys from Michael's war room. They think they're dealing with an uninformed widow and a naive niece. Time to show them exactly who they're really facing. For the first time since Michael's death, Emily laughed, a sound of genuine amusement. Dad always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met. That underneath that quiet high school teacher was a tactical genius who could outthink anyone if properly motivated. Did he really say that, I asked, surprised? All the time? She smiled, wiping away the last of her tears. He also said that the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Linda Henderson. As we left the cafe together, I felt a shift in the dynamic of this battle. The Henderson brothers had unwittingly united us instead of dividing us. They had no idea that their apparent early success with Emily had only set the stage for their ultimate defeat. Later that evening, with Emily beside me, I laid out my complete plan to the attorney Michael had selected for this exact scenario. His expression moved from professional interest to undisguised admiration as he grasped the full scope of what I proposed. Mrs. Henderson, he said finally, your husband said you would surprise me with your strategic thinking. He was right. My husband, I replied, was right about a great many things, including, it seemed, his belief in my ability to not just survive his death, but to emerge stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal. The Henderson brothers arrived at Willow Ridge Ranch exactly when I expected, 9:30 a.m. sharp, 4 days after my meeting with Emily. Their black SUV crunched up the gravel driveway with the confidence of men who believed victory was merely a formality. Behind them, followed a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize, likely their attorney or financial advisor. I watched from the great room window, dressed not in the casual clothes they'd seen previously, but in a tailored suit I'd purchased specifically for this meeting. Appearances matter when staging a coup, and I intended to present myself not as a grieving widow, but as the formidable opponent Michael had always known me to be. "They're here?" I called to Emily, who emerged from the kitchen looking equally professional in a dark blue dress, her father's watch, one of his most treasured possessions, prominently displayed on her wrist. "Ready?" she asked, nervousness and determination warring in her expression. "Completely." I squeezed her hand. "Remember, let them talk themselves into a corner first." Frank appeared from the back of the house. The others arrived through the service entrance. "They're set up in the dining room as you requested." I nodded appreciation. "Perfect timing." The doorbell rang, and Frank moved to answer it with the practiced deference of a caretaker who knew his role in this carefully choreographed performance. "Good morning, gentlemen," I heard him greet them. "Mrs. Henderson and Miss Emily are expecting you. This way, please." They entered with the easy entitlement of men accustomed to controlling rooms. Richard led, followed by Stephen with his ever-present legal portfolio, and Mark bringing up the rear. Behind them walked a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who radiated corporate authority. "Linda." Richard nodded, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. This is Andrew Porter, CEO of North Star Energy. We thought it might be productive to have an industry expert join our discussion about the property's potential. So they'd brought an oil executive to intimidate me with technical jargon and market valuations. Predictable." "How thoughtful," I replied pleasantly. "I've had the dining room prepared for our meeting." "Shall we?" I led them through the house, noting their assessing glances at the renovations Michael had completed. In the formal dining room, a large table had been set with documents at each place, water carts and coffee service, the picture of professional preparation. "Please sit," I gestured. "I believe we have much to discuss." As they settled into their chairs, expressions of confidence still firmly in place, I remained standing at the head of the table. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was educational." Richard's smile widened, clearly interpreting my comment as submission. "We're pleased you've had time to consider our offer with Mr. Porter's expertise. We can discuss the most advantageous arrangement for dividing the property's assets." "Yes, division," I amused, picking up a remote control from the table. "That's precisely what I'd like to discuss." I pressed a button, and a hidden screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The brothers exchanged surprised glances. Clearly, they hadn't expected this level of preparation. "If you'll direct your attention to the presentation," I continued, clicking the remote again. A detailed map of Willow Ridge Ranch appeared on the screen, showing property boundaries, topographical features, and geological formations. "This is the complete survey of Willow Ridge," I explained. "All 200 to 400 acres, not just the eastern 900 acres mentioned in your proposal." Stephen shifted uncomfortably. "The western section is undevelopable, rocky terrain. We excluded it for simplicity's sake." "How considerate." I smiled, except for one small detail. Another click, and the map overlaid with oil deposit locations. The complete geological survey from Michael's war room showing the massive reserve beneath the worthless western acres. Andrew Porter straightened in his chair, professional mask slipping, as he leaned forward to study the projection with sudden, intense interest. "As you can see," I continued calmly, "the primary oil deposit extends predominantly beneath the western section, the acres you so generously offered to exclude from our fair division." Richard's face flushed. "These surveys are unreliable. North Star Energy's analysis indicates—" actually interrupted a new voice as the connecting door opened. "Those surveys have been verified by 3 independent geological teams." The Henderson brothers turned in shock as Daniel Brooks, CEO of Frontier Ridge Energy, North Star Energy's primary competitor, entered the room, followed by my attorney and two individuals in business attire. "What is this?" Richard demanded, half rising from his chair. "This," I said pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value and future of Willow Ridge Ranch. Mr. Brooks has expressed significant interest in the property's potential, particularly after reviewing the complete geological data my husband compiled." Andrew Porter shot a betrayed glance at the Henderson brothers. "You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights to this property." "They don't," my attorney interjected smoothly, placing additional documents on the table. "Mrs. Henderson holds clear, uncontested title to the entire property, including all mineral rights. The documents you've been shown by the Henderson brothers have no legal standing whatsoever." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "This property has been in the Henderson family for generations. Michael had a moral obligation." "Moral obligations?" Emily spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite her white-knuckled grip on her water glass. "Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you stole his inheritance or forged his signature on loan documents or threatened to implicate him in your financial crimes if he exposed you." The brothers froze, color draining from their faces. "What exactly is she talking about?" Andrew Porter asked, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Perhaps these will clarify matters," I said, nodding to my attorney who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. Copies of documentation my husband preserved regarding certain historical transactions involving Henderson family assets. "I believe the statute of limitations has expired on some of these matters, but the Canadian financial regulatory authorities might still find others quite interesting." Stephen opened his envelope, scanning the contents with increasing alarm. "These are private family matters," he sputtered, completely irrelevant to the current discussion. "On the contrary," I countered, finally taking my seat at the head of the table. "They establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your credibility in these negotiations. Behavior that continued when you deliberately misled Mr. Porter about your standing to negotiate for this property." The room fell silent as the Henderson brothers realized the completeness of their exposure. Michael had documented everything: their historical crimes against him, their recent manipulations, their attempts to seize valuable assets while appearing generous. "What do you want?" Richard finally asked, his confident facade crumbling. "I want you to leave Willow Ridge Ranch and never return," I stated simply. "I want you to cease all attempts to contest my ownership or manipulate my daughter. In exchange, these documents remain private, viewable only by the people in this room." Andrew Porter stood abruptly. "I believe my company's involvement in this matter has been based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Henderson, I'll be in touch directly regarding any future discussions of mineral rights." He shot a disgusted look at the brothers before exiting. Richard's expression hardened as he watched his oil company ally depart. "You have no idea what you're doing, Linda. The extraction costs for the western section are prohibitive. The logistics alone, actually." Daniel Brooks interjected. "Frontier Ridge Energy has developed new extraction technology specifically suited to these geological formations. We're prepared to make Mrs. Henderson an offer that acknowledges both the challenges and the exceptional potential of this property." As the meeting continued transforming from the Henderson brothers' planned takeover into my carefully orchestrated counteroffensive, I caught Emily's eye across the table. Her slight smile conveyed everything: pride, vindication, and the bittersweet acknowledgement that Michael had prepared us for this moment, even from beyond the grave. By the time the Henderson brothers departed 90 minutes later, defeated, exposed, and legally bound by the settlement agreement my attorney had prepared in advance, the future of Willow Ridge Ranch had been secured exactly as Michael had envisioned, not divided among greedy relatives, not sold to the highest bidder, but preserved as a legacy for the family he had chosen and loved Emily and me. As their vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Frank appeared at my side. "Your husband would be proud," he said quietly. "You outmaneuvered them exactly as he believed you would." I watched the dust settle on the driveway, a strange mix of emotions washing through me. Triumph tinged with grief, strength emerging from vulnerability. "We're not finished yet," I replied, thinking of the videos still waiting on Michael's laptop, the future stretching before us. This was just the first battle. But it was a battle we had decisively won, using weapons Michael had meticulously prepared, and the strength he had always seen in me even when I couldn't see it in myself. The weeks following the Henderson brothers' defeat passed in a blur of practical matters. Legal documents finalizing our settlement agreement meetings with Frontier Ridge Energy to structure a mutually beneficial extraction arrangement and careful inventory of everything Michael had created at Willow Ridge Ranch. Emily stayed with me through it all, her initial resentment about her father's secrets transforming into appreciation for his foresight. We established a routine of watching his daily videos together each morning, both of us finding comfort and guidance in his posthumous presence. "Did you have any idea," Emily asked one evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset behind the Cedar Hills that contained our newfound wealth, "any suspicion at all that Dad was sick or planning all this?" I considered the question carefully, searching my memories for missed signals. There were small things that make sense in retrospect. His insistence on updating our wills 3 years ago. The way he'd sometimes look at us at dinner, almost memorizing our faces. His sudden interest in taking photos of ordinary moments. "I thought he was just going through a midlife appreciation phase," Emily said, smiling sadly. "In a way, he was just not for the reasons we assumed." I sipped my tea, remembering. The biggest change was how he stopped putting things off. Your father was always a someday person about personal matters. Someday we'd take that trip to Europe. Someday he'd learn to sail. Someday would renovate the kitchen. Then suddenly he started doing things rather than talking about them. "Like buying this place?" Emily nodded. "Creating something lasting." "Exactly." I attributed it to him finally feeling financially secure enough to indulge some dreams. I shook my head, still coming to terms with the magnitude of what he'd concealed. I never imagined he was racing against time, creating a legacy, because he knew he wouldn't be here to see it mature. The Frontier Ridge Energy representatives had been shocked when ID outlined my conditions for their access to the oil beneath our property. Rather than selling the mineral rights outright for a lump sum, as most landowners did, I had insisted on a structured arrangement that prioritized environmental protection, employed sustainable extraction methods, and established a substantial trust for restoration after the oil was depleted. Mrs. Henderson, their lead negotiator, had said, "These terms are highly unusual in the industry." "Then perhaps the industry needs more unusual terms," I had replied, channeling Michael's quiet confidence. "The oil has been there for millions of years. It can stay there until we agree on responsible methods to retrieve it." To my surprise, Daniel Brooks, the CEO, had been intrigued rather than deterred by my approach. "Your husband mentioned you were an environmental science major before switching to literature," he'd noted. "He said you'd insist on doing this right, not just profitably." Another piece of Michael's planning revealed. He'd clearly been in communication with select industry leaders, laying groundwork for negotiations he knew would follow his death. 6 weeks after claiming my inheritance, I stood in the art studio Michael had created, sunlight streaming through the north-facing windows, illuminating a blank canvas on the easel. After decades away from painting, I had finally picked up a brush again, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Today's subject waited patiently in the paddock visible through the studio windows. Shadow, the magnificent Frisian stallion Michael had purchased because he reminded him of a painting he'd admired 20 years earlier. Frank had been teaching me to ride again, my middle-aged body protesting, then adapting to the forgotten rhythms of horsemanship. "Mom." Emily appeared in the doorway, laptop in hand. "Today's video is different. I think you should see it alone." I set down my paintbrush, curious. We had fallen into the routine of watching Michael's daily messages together over breakfast, finding comfort in the shared experience. Different how? It's marked specifically for month 2, day 15. He titled it, "When Linda Starts Painting Again, She handed me the computer with a gentle smile. He knew you would, eventually. Alone in the studio, surrounded by the tools of a passion I was rediscovering. I opened the laptop and pressed play. Michael appeared seated in this very room before any of the art supplies had been installed, the space bare except for the magnificent windows. "Hello, my love." He began, his smile warm and intimate. "If you're watching this, you found your way back to your art, back to the passion you set aside for our family all those years ago." I touched the screen gently, tears welling in my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy," he continued. "What we leave behind, what marks we make on the world. Most people think of legacy in terms of children, or wealth, or accomplishment. But there's another kind of legacy, the enabling of possibility in those we love." He gestured to the empty room around him. "This space isn't finished yet, but in my mind, I can see it completed, filled with light and color and your creations. I imagine you standing before an easel brush in hand, finally giving form to the visions you've carried inside you all these years." I glanced at the half-finished portrait of Shadow on my easel, struck by how closely it aligned with Michael's imagination. "I've structured everything to give you freedom, Lynn," he continued. "Financial security through the oil rights protection from my brother's interference, a beautiful space to create. But what you do with that freedom, that's your legacy, to build, not mine to dictate." He leaned closer to the camera, his expression intense. "The farm, the horses, the art studio, they're not the inheritance. They're just the tools. The real inheritance is possibility, the chance to become more fully yourself, without constraint." I paused, the video overwhelmed by the depth of his understanding. Michael had known me better than I knew myself, had seen the dormant artist still alive within the practical teacher and devoted mother I'd become. When I resumed the video, his expression had softened again. "I have one request, though it's yours to accept or decline. In the storage closet behind this room is a large canvas I commissioned before my diagnosis. It's blank, waiting. When you're ready, truly ready, I hope you create something for it. Something that captures not just what you see, but what you feel about this place that brought me back to my beginnings and will carry you into your future." The video ended with his familiar sign-off. "Until tomorrow, my love." I sat motionless for several minutes, processing his words. Then, moved by impulse, I went to the storage closet and found exactly what he'd described, an enormous blank canvas, custom-built for the prominent wall in the great room. It was the perfect size to create a statement piece, a focal point for the heart of the home Michael had created. Over the following weeks, as autumn painted the landscape in brilliant hues, I sketched countless drafts trying to capture the essence of Willow Ridge Ranch and what it represented. None satisfied me until one morning, watching Emily riding Shadow across the eastern meadow, something clicked. The painting took shape gradually, not a traditional landscape, but a blending of real and metaphorical elements. The farm as it existed now in the background, rendered with photographic precision. In the foreground, a series of translucent layers showing what had come before the abandoned property Michael had purchased, the family farm of his childhood. And beneath it all, the ancient land that had witnessed generations come and go. Threading through these temporal layers were two riders on horseback, a man and a woman, their features indistinct enough to represent both specific and universal journeys. Behind them, barely visible unless you knew to look, a third figure, a young woman forging her own path forward. When the painting was finally complete, Frank helped me hang it in its designated place in the great room. Emily stood back, studying it with tears in her eyes. "It's him, isn't it, and you and me?" She traced the paths of the riders with her finger from a distance. the past, present, and future of this place. Legacy, I said simply. Not what's left behind, but what continues forward. That evening, as I watched the sunset from the porch of what was now truly my home, I felt Michael's presence not as a ghost or memory, but as a continuing partnership. He had given me not just material security, but a framework for reinvention, the freedom to discover who Linda Henderson might become when unconstrained by circumstance. The oil would provide financial stability for generations. The farm would evolve according to our stewardship, and I would continue bringing beauty into the world through newly rediscovered talents, creating my own legacy alongside the one Michael had so carefully prepared. Tomorrow's video waited on the laptop inside, another day of guidance and connection across the boundary that separated us. But increasingly, I found myself looking forward rather than back, grateful for his foresight, but eager to write the next chapters of this unexpected story myself. The forbidden farm had become hallowed ground, not a place of secrets and pain as Michael had once known it, but a sanctuary of possibility, his final and greatest gift to me. Winter descended on Willow Ridge Ranch with dramatic beauty. Pristine snowfall blanketing the rolling pastures, ice crystals forming delicate patterns on the windows, smoke curling from the stone chimney into the crisp Saskatchewan sky. I had decided to stay through the season rather than return to Wisconsin, drawn to experience the full cycle of seasons on this land that had become my unexpected home. Emily had reluctantly returned to her life in Madison, her marketing firm unwilling to extend her leave of absence indefinitely. Our daily video ritual continued via FaceTime. The three of us still connected, Emily in her urban apartment, me in the farmhouse living room, and Michael's recorded presence binding us across time and space. The Cedar Hills are particularly beautiful after fresh snow, Michael remarked in today's video, filmed exactly 1 year ago in the same room. If Frank has kept up the maintenance on the snowmobile in the equipment barn, take it out to the ridge overlooking the valley. The view at sunrise is worth the early wake-up call. I smiled at his continuing ability to anticipate my experiences. Just yesterday, Frank had mentioned the snowmobile and offered to show me the winter trails Michael had mapped out across the property. 6 months had passed since I'd confronted the Henderson brothers. True to our agreement, they had maintained their distance, though my attorney occasionally forwarded communications from their legal team. Technical questions about property boundaries as Frontier Ridge Energy began preliminary work on the eastern edge of the farm. The oil extraction project was proceeding with deliberate care, the company honoring our unusual arrangement that prioritized environmental protection over rapid profit. Daniel Brooks had become an unexpected ally, his initial business interest evolving into genuine respect for the sustainable approach Michael had envisioned and I had insisted upon. My phone rang, pulling me from these thoughts. Emily's name flashed on the screen. "Everything okay?" I answered immediately, concerned by the unexpected call. Our daily video chat wasn't scheduled for several hours. "I'm not sure," she replied, her voice tense. "I just had a strange visit from Uncle Mark." My grip tightened on the phone. "Mark, what did he want?" "Officially, he came to apologize for his role in trying to manipulate me against you." She paused, but something felt off about the whole conversation. He kept asking subtle questions about the farm, whether I visited often, if I'd noticed any unusual activity around the property. "Did you tell him anything?" "Of course not." I kept responses vague and noncommittal. Her voice lowered. "Mom, I think they're planning something." This felt like reconnaissance. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter temperature ran through me. The Henderson brothers had been suspiciously quiet these past months. Too quiet, perhaps, for men accustomed to fighting for what they wanted. "I'll alert Frank and increase security," I assured her. "And I'll have my attorney contact theirs with a reminder about the terms of our agreement." "There's something else," Emily added hesitantly. "Mark mentioned that Richard has been ill." some heart condition requiring surgery. He tried to play on my sympathy, suggesting that families should come together in difficult times. The same heart condition that had taken Michael the genetic hypertrophic cardiomyopathy he'd inherited from his father. I wondered if Richard had hidden his diagnosis from his brothers, just as Michael had concealed his from us. Be careful, Emily. This could be legitimate, or it could be another manipulation tactic. That's what I thought, she sighed. I hate being suspicious of every interaction with Dad's family. It shouldn't be this way. After ending the call, I walked to the window overlooking the snow-covered driveway, unease settling in my stomach. The Henderson brothers had proven themselves ruthless and deceptive. Their apparent retreat might simply be strategic regrouping. I called Frank, immediately relaying Emily's concerns. His response was characteristically calm, but resolute. "I'll alert the security team and check the perimeter surveillance," he assured me. We installed those systems for exactly this scenario. Another of Michael's precautions, discreet but comprehensive security throughout the property, with cameras monitoring all access points and motion sensors covering the most vulnerable approaches. At the time, I thought it excessive. Now I was grateful for his foresight. That evening, I found myself drawn to the hidden bunker beneath the barn, seeking guidance from Michael's meticulously organized records. If the Henderson brothers were planning another attempt to claim Willow Ridge Ranch, perhaps he had anticipated this scenario as well. In the concrete room filled with filing cabinets and maps, I searched for anything related to continued threats post-settlement. In the bottom drawer of Michael's desk, I found a folder labeled simply "If They Return" in his precise handwriting. Inside was a detailed contingency plan, steps to take if his brothers violated the agreement, including pre-drafted legal injunctions, contact information for Canadian authorities who had investigated their past financial dealings, and surprisingly, a sealed letter addressed to Richard Henderson. A note in Michael's handwriting was paperclipped to the envelope, a last resort. Only deliver if absolutely necessary. What had my husband written to his estranged older brother that he considered so potentially powerful or damaging that it should only be used in extremis? The envelope was sealed, the contents a final mystery Michael had left for me to uncover only if circumstances demanded it. I returned to the main house, the sealed letter secure in my pocket, my mind turning over possibilities and strategies. Outside, gentle snow began falling again, adding another pristine layer to the winter landscape. The next morning, Frank knocked on my door as I was finishing breakfast. "We have visitors," he announced, his expression grave. "All 3 Henderson brothers plus 2 men I don't recognize." At the gate, he nodded. "They're requesting entry. Richard claims it's a personal family matter not related to the property dispute." I moved to the great room window, which offered a view of the entrance gates in the distance. 2 vehicles waited there, the familiar black SUV and a more modest sedan. "What do you think they really want?" I asked Frank. "Nothing good," he replied bluntly, "but refusing to see them might provoke whatever they're planning. Better to control the encounter on our terms." I considered this hand unconsciously touching the letter in my pocket. "Have security stay alert but not visible. Let them approach the main house only. No access to other buildings." As Frank went to convey these instructions, I called my attorney to inform him of the unexpected visit. Then Emily to warn her that her uncles had appeared at the farm less than 24 hours after Mark's casual visit to her. "Do you want me to come?" she asked immediately. "I can be on the next flight." "No," I decided. "Stay where you are. This might be exactly what they want to get both of us here isolated from our legal support system." Through the window, I watched the gates open, allowing the 2 vehicles to proceed up the long driveway. Steeling myself, I went to my bedroom to retrieve one additional item Michael had left for precisely this type of confrontation. A small digital recorder disguised as a decorative brooch. Whatever the Henderson brothers wanted, I intended to have a record of every word. When the doorbell rang, I was waiting in the great room, seated calmly in the armchair facing the entryway, the recorder pinned to my sweater, the mysterious letter secure in my pocket. Frank answered the door with professional courtesy, ushering in our unwelcome visitors. Richard entered first, looking noticeably thinner than at our last encounter, his complexion grayish beneath his tan. Stephen and Mark followed, their expressions carefully neutral. The two strangers brought up the rear, one carrying a medical bag suggesting he was a physician, the other holding a leather portfolio similar to those favored by legal professionals. Linda. Richard nodded in greeting, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment. Family always seems to arrive unexpectedly," I replied mildly. "Please sit. Frank, would you bring coffee for our guests?" As they arranged themselves on the sofas opposite my chair, I noted the tension in their postures, the way Stephen kept glancing at Richard with poorly concealed concern. Whatever had brought them here, it centered on the eldest Henderson. "I'll be direct," Richard began once Frank had departed for the kitchen. "I've been diagnosed with the same heart condition that took Michael hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It runs in the family, so Emily's information had been accurate." I maintained a neutral expression, waiting for him to continue. "My condition is advanced. The specialists give me 8 months without intervention, possibly years with the right treatment." He gestured to the man with the medical bag. "This is Dr. Collins, my cardiologist, and Mr. Nolan, my personal attorney." "I'm sorry to hear about your health challenges," I said carefully, "but I'm not clear on why this brings you to Willow Ridge Ranch." Richard exchanged glances with his brothers before continuing. "I need a heart transplant, Linda, but there's a complication. Our family has a rare blood type and tissue markers that make finding a compatible donor extremely difficult." A creeping suspicion began forming in my mind. That sounds challenging, but again, why come to me with this? Because Dr. Collins interjected professionally based on the medical records we've reviewed. "Your late husband would have been a perfect donor match for Richard, and given the genetic factors involved, there's a significant probability that your daughter might be compatible as well." The audacity of their request hit me like a physical blow. They wanted to test Emily to use my daughter's body as a potential source of salvation for the man who had tried to steal her inheritance and turn her against me. "You want my daughter to be tested as a potential donor for you?" I clarified, making sure the recorder captured every word of this extraordinary conversation. "Just preliminary blood work to check compatibility." Stephen jumped in smoothly. "Nothing invasive at this stage. And if she matches," I pressed. "What then?" "Then we would hope she might consider becoming a living donor," Richard replied. "The procedure allows for partial liver transplantation with minimal risk to the donor. Her liver would regenerate completely within months." I sat in stunned silence, marveling at their breathtaking entitlement. After attempting to manipulate, deceive, and defraud us, they now expected my daughter to undergo major surgery for a man she barely knew. A man who had tried to turn her against her own mother. "Let me understand correctly," I said finally, my voice steady despite my internal turmoil. "You tried to steal this property from me, attempted to turn my daughter against me with lies and half-truths, and now you're here asking if she'll undergo surgery to save your life." Richard at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I understand how this appears, but we're still family, Linda. Blood connects us whether we choose it or not." "Blood," I repeated thoughtfully, remembering Michael's videos, his painful history with these men, his determination to protect Emily and me from their toxic influence. "You're right about one thing, Richard. Blood does connect us, but not in the way you think." I withdrew the sealed letter from my pocket, noting the flash of recognition in Richard's eyes. "Michael left this for you," I said, holding it just out of his reach with instructions to deliver it only if absolutely necessary. "I believe this qualifies." Richard stared at the sealed envelope in my hand, recognition and apprehension flickering across his drawn features. "Michael wrote to me. Apparently, he anticipated that even a legal settlement wouldn't keep you away permanently. I held the letter, making no move to hand it over yet. He prepared for every contingency, including this one. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Dr. Collins shifted awkwardly, clearly sensing he'd been brought into something more complex than a straightforward medical consultation. The Henderson brothers exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Before I give you this, I continued, I want absolute clarity about what you're asking. You want my daughter, the same young woman you manipulated and lied to 6 months ago, to undergo medical testing and potentially major surgery to save your life. It sounds callous when you phrase it that way, Stephen interjected. But yes, essentially Richard's condition is grave, and family members provide the best chance for compatible donation. Why not Mark or Stephen, I asked, looking at the other brothers. Siblings are typically even better matches than nieces. Dr. Collins cleared his throat. We've tested both Mr. Henderson's brothers. Neither is compatible due to some unusual genetic factors. And there are no other siblings, I pressed, watching their reactions carefully. No other family members who might be suitable donors? Another significant glance between the brothers. Mark looked away, suddenly fascinated by the view through the window. No, Richard replied firmly. No other siblings? I nodded slowly, then handed him Michael's letter. I think you should read this before we continue this conversation. With slightly trembling hands, Richard broke the seal and unfolded the pages inside. His eyes moved across the first few lines, then widened in shock. Color drained from his face as he continued reading the pages, shaking visibly in his grasp. Stephen leaned forward. Richard, what is it? But Richard didn't respond, completely absorbed in Michael's words. When he finally looked up, his expression had transformed. The confident businessman replaced by a man confronting ghosts he'd thought long buried. How long have you known? He asked me hoarsely. I only know that Michael left this for you with instructions that it contained information you might need someday. I met his gaze steadily. What exactly did my husband write? Richard handed the letter to Stephen, who began reading with Mark looking over his shoulder. Their expressions shifted in near unison, from curiosity to disbelief to something approaching horror. This can't be true. Stephen, Richard said, finally looking at Mark. Father would have told us. Would he? Richard laughed bitterly. The same father who pitted us against each other our entire lives, who played favorites depending on his mood, who took pleasure in holding secrets over our heads. I watched this exchange with growing curiosity. Whatever Michael had revealed in that letter had clearly shaken the brothers to their core. Perhaps, I suggested quietly, someone should tell me what my husband wrote. Richard seemed to remember my presence, his gaze refocusing on me with new awareness. Michael wasn't our half-brother. He was our full brother. This made no sense. I don't understand. Michael told me. Your father remarried after your mother died, giving birth to him. That's why there was such an age gap between you. That was the story we all believed, Richard confirmed. But according to this letter, Michael discovered the truth while researching his heart condition. Our mother didn't die in childbirth. She left our father when Michael was an infant, unable to tolerate his abusive behavior any longer. Father created the story about her death to avoid the scandal of abandonment and to punish her by erasing her completely. But that's not all. Stephen continued, his legal precision reasserting itself even through his shock. Michael discovered that our father had another family, a relationship that began before our mother left and continued for decades after a woman in Regina with whom he had 2 more children. Now I understood the significance. 2 more Henderson siblings, a brother and sister, both in their 40s now, Richard confirmed, scanning the letter again. Both sharing our rare blood type and genetic markers, according to medical records Michael somehow obtained, and likely unaware of their connection to you. I surmised the pieces falling into place. Michael found them, but didn't contact them, did he? He simply confirmed their existence and medical compatibility. Richard nodded slowly. According to this, he even had their contact information verified annually through a private investigator, ensuring it remained current. In case one of you ever needed what you're asking of Emily. Now, I finished for him. A compatible donor from family you never acknowledged. The irony was breathtaking. The Henderson brothers had come to ask my daughter, the niece they had tried to manipulate and defraud, for potentially life-saving organ donation, while completely unknown siblings existed who might provide the same medical match. "There's more," Mark said quietly, having taken the letter from Stephen. "Michael writes that he only discovered all this after his own diagnosis. He was already planning Willow Ridge Ranch for you, Linda. But learning about these other siblings solidified his resolve to break completely from the Henderson family legacy of secrets and manipulation. He writes that he wanted to create something honest and transparent, to leave behind something built on love rather than obligation." Tears pricked at my eyes as I recognized my husband's values in those words. Even from beyond the grave, Michael was teaching all of us about integrity and truth. So I said, "Finally, it seems you have alternatives to approaching my daughter, two half-siblings who share your medical markers." "Strangers," Richard protested weakly. "We don't even know these people." "And whose fault is that?" I countered. "Your father chose to keep them secret. You and your brothers chose to treat Michael as less worthy than yourselves. Now you face the consequences of those choices." Dr. Collins cleared his throat again. "Forgive me, but from a medical perspective, any potential donor should be contacted quickly. Mr. Henderson's condition is deteriorating rapidly. I considered the man before me, Richard Henderson, once powerful and intimidating, now diminished by illness and the collapse of his family mythology. Despite everything he had done, I couldn't find satisfaction in his suffering. Michael wouldn't have wanted that. "The contact information for your half-siblings," I said. "Is it included in the letter?" Richard nodded mutely. "Then I suggest you begin there," I told him. "Not with demands, but with humility and truth. Tell them who you are. Explain your medical situation and give them the choice that should be theirs to make. Just as such a choice would be Emily's alone, not mine, not yours, if you had approached her with honesty from the beginning. And if they refuse?" Stephen asked. "Then Emily can decide for herself if she wishes to be tested," I replied. "But she'll make that decision with complete knowledge of all facts and alternatives. No manipulation, no pressure, no lies." The Henderson brothers absorbed this in silence, the family resemblance between them and my late husband suddenly more apparent in their chastened expressions. Michael had had their same strong jawline, the same deep-set eyes, features I now noticed with new clarity. "Well, go," Richard said, finally rising with effort from the sofa. "Thank you for this." He gestured to the letter, which Mark carefully folded and returned to the envelope. As Frank showed them out, I remained seated, processing the unexpected revelation and its implications. Michael had known he had other siblings, family members, who might have welcomed him, who shared his biological heritage. Yet he had chosen to keep that knowledge in reserve, using it only as protection for Emily and me after he was gone. That evening, as snow fell gently outside the windows of Willow Ridge Ranch, I opened the laptop for the day's video from Michael. His familiar face appeared on the screen, recorded exactly a year ago in this very room. "Hello, my love." He began, his smile warming me across time. If I've calculated correctly, today might be the day my brothers finally play their medical card. They've known about my condition for years. Our father made sure to inform them when I was first diagnosed as a teenager, though they never offered help. Then I gasped softly, once again astonished by his foresight. "If they've approached you or Emily about donation compatibility, then you've given them the letter about our other siblings." His expression grew thoughtful. "I considered contacting them myself many times over the years, but their lives were established, their family complete. I questioned my right to disrupt that with ancient history and biological connections that might mean nothing to them. He leaned closer to the camera. The truth is, Lynn family isn't about blood. It's about choice. I chose you and Emily as my family. I hope whoever Richard and the others approach will be allowed the same freedom of choice to help or not to connect, or not without manipulation or obligation. As the video continued, Michael sharing his thoughts on family and legacy with characteristic thoughtfulness. I felt a sense of completion settling over me. The Henderson brothers had come seeking to use Emily as a means to an end, just as they had always used Michael. Instead, they had been forced to confront the tangled web of secrets their father had woven, and the consequences of their own choices. Whether they would reach out to their newly discovered siblings with genuine openness or the same manipulative tactics they'd always employed remained to be seen, but that was no longer my concern. Or Michael's, or Emily's. We had broken free of the toxic Henderson family dynamics, claiming our own legacy through Willow Ridge Ranch and the life we were building here. Michael had transformed his childhood prison into my sanctuary, his painful past into my promising future. The forbidden farm had become hallowed ground indeed, not because of the oil beneath its soil or the financial security it provided, but because it represented Michael's final triumph over the family that had rejected him and the lasting love that had sustained him. Spring would come again to Willow Ridge Ranch. The horses would run in green pastures. Oil would be carefully extracted from the Cedar Hills, and I would continue creating art in the studio my husband had designed. Emily would visit when she could, perhaps bringing children of her own someday, to ride horses and explore the land their grandfather had reclaimed. And Michael would remain present in the legacy he had so carefully crafted. Not just in the daily videos that would eventually end, but in every corner of this place that reflected his love, his foresight, and his determination that the mistakes of the past would not dictate the shape of the future. The forbidden had become the cherished. The secret had become the celebrated. And I, Linda Henderson, had become the caretaker of a legacy built not on obligation or blood, but on the purest foundation of all love, freely given and gratefully received. Until tomorrow, my love, Michael said, as the day's video concluded. Until tomorrow, I whispered back, knowing that while tomorrow would bring a new video, a new message from the past, it would also bring me one day closer to the future I was now creating. Inspired by his example, but shaped by my own emerging strength, the legacy of Willow Ridge Ranch continued, no longer forbidden, but forever transformed. Thank you very much for watching. Share with those who also like stories. Subscribe and tell me in the comments if you liked my story. Cheers.